thanks so much for your time today, and big welcome to the Sporting Transition podcast. Really appreciate you freeing up a bit of time to join us today and share your experiences of that kind of post-elite athlete career and what that looks like. Just to get started, nice and easy, would love for you to tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do now, what your sport was, what the highlight was, and from there we'll jump into a little bit about that transition into your career.
Yeah, wonderful. So Charlie Cousins, I am the VP of Sales at Passle. We're a tech company. We have a product that helps busy professionals with their thought leadership. So I sell into law firms and professional services. My background in sport was rowing. So I rowed from the age of, well, I'm still rowing now. I rowed competitively in the national team from the age of 16 till about 27. Was fortunate enough to compete at the London Olympics and multiple world champs. And unfortunately, got injured before Rio. So I'm from professional sport back then. In the last few years, alongside my job, I have picked up rowing again. So I still compete, not on the flat water stuff, but in coastal rowing, which is a new fast growing discipline that actually is going into the Olympics in 2028. So I'm still involved with sport now, but I guess day to day I work as a salesperson.
Cool, nice intro. We'll come back to coastal rowing, I guess, a little bit later because it's an interesting sport and you kind of come back to it after retiring. So it's kind of answers the question around what's your relationship like with your sport now. Some people really just cut it out and that's the end of it. Whereas here you've kind of come back to it 6 years after your retirement. But I'll come back to it a bit later because before that, I've got a couple of kind of quick fire questions for you. So one of the questions is, who was your childhood hero?
Oh, geez. I was really into my skateboarding. So I remember playing the Tony Hawk Pro Skater game. And I was like, I want to be just like Tony Hawk. And I used to watch, not YouTube clips because YouTube wasn't around back then, but like actual VHSs of recordings of like the X Games. And I thought, oh, this guy's pretty cool. And also he was very tall as well, or is very tall. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to be a skateboarder, just like Tony Hawk.
Yeah, how funny. And you're not even that much younger than me. You're kind of 5 years younger than me, and you're also on the VHS vibe. So that's reassuring for me. It makes me feel a bit younger. But what's the sort of toughest training session you would do? I mean, we often talk about how intense rowing can be. How hard will you push? And what's the one session you cast back your brain to and think, bloody hell, that was intense, and I can't believe I did it?
It's hard to pull out one particular session. I think one of the things that would always create a bit of nervousness was when we had to do a 2,000 meter test on the rowing machine, and it's essentially there's no escape because it's just you and the machine. What you put in is what you get out, and some days you're feeling good, some days it's a battle, some days you surprise yourself. But that fear going into it, I don't think there's any other test where I got that same sort of fear and apprehension.
and when you do those tests, how would you know that you've pushed hard enough? What was the physical limit? Was it just the time? So you would know that that's the time I need to do, or would it be a physical, when you say you're not feeling particularly well, you're not feeling particularly strong, does that mean you kind of need to go to blackout territory to prove to the coaches that actually you're in it?
I think if you've had a good run or if you're feeling good, but I guess you're always on that fine line between working as hard as you can and going too hard. And I think probably my best scores were ones where I never got to that point where I was over the edge. But then you're always left with that feeling like, oh, I could have gone a little bit harder. And a good example is we did the British record for a long time was no one had been below 5 minutes 40. So that was like this big benchmark that no one had ever crossed. And well, in the last sort of couple of years, there's been 2 guys that have crossed it. But back then, I remember going for a sub 540 and like being on 539.9 for a little bit, and then I did run out of steam on like the last 2 strokes, and I saw the like average time click over to 5:40.1, and I just remember thinking like, oh no, like I ran out of steam just that little bit too early. But that was good times.
Yeah. And what did you dream about when you were younger? What did you think you'd end up doing? You know, when you were 7, 8 years old, you know, in your primary school, teachers ask you what you want to do. What were the sorts of things going through your head?
I don't really know, really. I think really random stuff: zookeeper, beekeeper, a scuba diver. I remember going to the Sea Life Centre and was like, yeah, I want a job where I can work with fish in the ocean. Yeah, so I don't really know. I didn't really have an idea in my head. I can safely say that sports wasn't on my radar even up to the age of 15 when I started rowing. I had no ambition to be an athlete or compete at the Olympics. I didn't even watch the Olympics. The closest thing I got to that was watching what's it called? Cool Runnings. That was my knowledge of Olympic sport.
Yeah, interesting. There's definitely a bit of a theme there. Jack Green, the 400-meter hurdler, he also had zookeeper ambitions when he was young. Lucy Charles Barkley, the Ironman triathlete, she worked at a zoo before turning professional. So there's something there to kind of follow it up. Cool. The other question I had was, what's the kind of big superpower you have from your rowing days that you think you bring to day-to-day work / life generally?
I want to say it's something I feel like I've developed for the later part of my career and rowing career and into my job now. I no longer get too excited by the big successes and the big wins, but on the flip side, I don't really get that down around stuff that doesn't go to plan, which is great for sport because you need to have a clear mind. You can't always be the winner. You know, there's other people working as hard as you, training as hard as you. So some days just winning just isn't on the cards. And if you beat yourself up too much, then you're never going to be setting yourself up for success long term. And it's very similar in what I do now in sales. It's so up and down from quarter to quarter. You might be riding an absolute high one quarter, and the next quarter you might close out without signing a single deal, and that can be really tough to take. But I think the key to that is maintaining that sort of balance and not getting too excited when things are going well. Yes, appreciate the good times, but you know it goes up and down, and you've just got to ride the wave and try and keep fairly level throughout. So I think that's probably one thing I've taken from sport through to what I do now.
Yeah, that's interesting. Kind of riding the micro wins, and on a day-to-day basis, there's probably tons of little things that actually do bring that level of satisfaction and success, without it being the Olympics or whatever the equivalent is in the Passle world. As an age grouper, that's what you are now, I think, or you will be soon. Not now because you're kind of GB still. In the next 10 years, you're going to move into age group territory. Do you think you'll be a serious age grouper, or will you be one of those elite athletes who just can't dabble in age group stuff because you'll never be able to achieve what you achieved in the past?
I think I will struggle, and that's the sort of battle I'm having at the moment with the coastal rowing. Is the reason maybe I haven't gone down the masters age group route is still able to be competitive in the open category. So I think I struggle to do things half-heartedly. So if I'm doing something, I want to commit as much time as I can to it. So with the coastal rowing now, obviously I don't train anywhere near as hard as what I used to when I was a full-time athlete, but I still probably train at a very high level. We're talking every day still I train. Some days, when I've got the time, I might do a session in the morning and a session in the evening, which is quite intense for someone who's doing it as a bit of fun. But for me, I think it's about respecting the competition, and a lot of the things that I'm doing in rowing, I feel you kind of need to do the prep, you need to do the work, and to turn up there. And it's not fun being 3 lengths down in a race. So I don't know why anyone would would not train for a race that they were serious about. And if you train hard and you're 3 lengths down, then it's a lot easier to take, because that's the point you've got to with the time you've had, and that's absolutely fine. And I can live with that, but I'm not about doing things half-heartedly, because it still takes time, and it's an opportunity cost where you can't do other things. So yeah, if I do something, I want to do it well.
Yeah, cool. So just snapping back to the earlier days of your career, at what age, I mean, you kind of talked about 16 years old is when you got into rowing. At what age did you feel that you maybe had to start sacrificing things for rowing?
I think it's an interesting word, sacrifice, when athletes use it, because at the end of the day, it is quite a selfish pursuit. You're not really making the true sacrifice. Often it's the people around you that are feeling it. So I think early on I was quite aware that I was giving up other things that were enticing me. So, at the age of 16, my friends were going out to parties on the weekend, and stuff that 16-year-olds do, and I maybe took my foot off that a little bit, but I never really felt like it was a sacrifice, because I really enjoyed rowing. Back when I was 16, I didn't see it as something that I would take long term up until the Olympics. It was something I just enjoyed doing. And I had a new group of friends that I met through rowing. And back then it was very different to what it is now. I've got younger siblings who are 18, 21, and it's very different. Like they've been connected all through the age of school, so they've known kids from different schools through social media, and just being more connected with folk they've just bumped into and met on the weekend at a sport event or something like that, and stayed connected. Whereas I feel like when I was a kid, I was in the village I lived in. I knew the kids in my village and the kids that went to my school. And when I started rowing, I was training in Cambridge. So I met kids from other schools, and got to learn a bit more about the other schools in the area, and it sort of opened my eyes a little bit. So it was just a nice group of people that were different to my friends in my village. I never really felt like I've always felt like I was getting more than I was giving up. So,
it sounds like it was almost really a bit. I was going to say, it almost felt like it was a bit of an adventure for you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was an adventure, and I never really felt it was a sacrifice. In the latter part of my career, I felt bad, because I remember when one of my brothers got married, it was the same weekend of Henley Regatta. And I could have raced our race was in the morning, and then we weren't racing till the following day. And I could have driven back and made it, but it probably wasn't the best idea. And there's a couple of moments like that where you're like, it was a bit frustrating. But for me, selfishly, I got to do what I want. I guess the main impact is on the other people around you, when they're like, they'd like you to be somewhere, and you're off doing your rowing. So yeah, for me,
that's interesting.
It was less of a sacrifice, more of an adventure. But I was mindful of the people around me and pick up that slack. Yeah.
And then do you feel you're making up for that now a little bit? So in that example with your brother's wedding, obviously you can't make that up unless he's going through a second wedding. But do you feel like do you feel like you're kind of going out your way a little bit to make up for those moments that you miss? So maybe now at Christmas, during the summer, do you make yourself maybe more available than you did in the past to compensate?
Yeah, I think, and it's something I'm mindful of, is I was away for a big part of my life. From when I left to uni, I very rarely came back home to Cambridge, where all my family were. And as I mentioned, got younger siblings, and they're all sort of adults now, grown up. So as I mentioned, my youngest brother's now 18. But also some of my siblings have started to have children, so getting back and spending time with them is good fun. So the fortunate thing for me is everyone is based in Cambridge, so I'm sort of one of 10 if you include all of my half siblings and step siblings, but we just call each other brothers and sisters. yeah, so it's getting back and seeing them all, which I really enjoy, and that's one of the perks of putting to bed the professional sport is that you get your weekends back and you can do all those
Yeah.
things and go hang out with your family. I've been in Cambridge for a week in between moving houses, and I've met brother for pizza one night, had dinner with my dad and my other brothers. I had dinner with my grandparents, and I do love having a bit more flexibility to do all of that.
And when did you really believe that the Olympics was something that you could achieve? And was that desire for potentially going to the Olympics something that really, really drove your commitment to rowing, maybe more than previously?
Yeah, I think in 2008. So I think the important thing is with the program I was on, the World Class Start program, which was a talent ID program that British Rowing set up. They went into schools to try and find big kids to teach them how to row. So they approached me when I was 15 and turning 16. And they had all these like ambitions they would talk to you about is like, you're going to be the next British rowers, you're going to make up the Olympic team. But back then I didn't really care for that. I just did it because I enjoyed it. And that was the same at junior level, went out and raced the world champs. But again, I wasn't thinking long term. I was just thinking, I enjoy this. I'm going to carry on doing it. But I think the turning point for me, and this is after with racing a world champs, winning under 23 medals, it still wasn't really. I'd say it because I felt like I had to say it. Oh yeah, I'd like to go to the Olympics. But in my head, I wasn't that fussed. I was just happy doing the training and enjoying it. But I remember in 2008, I was probably one of the top ranked under 23s, and someone in the senior quad got injured before the Olympic qualification regatta. So I got the call up and jumped into the boat. So all of a sudden I had this opportunity to go to the Beijing Olympics, but standing in our way was the qualification regatta, which is a savage event to go to. So it's basically the last chance saloon for qualification. Qualification for the Olympics in rowing is normally done the year before. So everyone qualifies, and then they hold back a couple of spots for the year of the Olympics where, nations that maybe missed out for whatever reason can try and qualify. So in the men's quad back then, there were 2 qualification spots available and probably 8 boats that were going for it. So I got selected to go out to that regatta, and we had like a good opening race. And then in the final, it's all on the line there. There was one boat that we just knew were going to qualify. They were miles faster than everyone else. So we sort of discounted them, and we knew that there was sort of 4 or 5 boats that were all sort of close and had the potential. And it honestly, the whole way down the race, we were neck and neck and got to the finish line. And the Belarusians were ahead of us by 0.3 of a second on the finish line. And those guys went off to the Olympics. And I remember watching on TV the opening ceremony and seeing the rowers that I raced against on the opening ceremony. And I just thought to myself, that's it. I'm going to do this for real. And I think I upped my training a notch there. And that sort of 4 years running into London, I really had a clear goal in my head. I was like, it's a home Olympics. I am serious about this. I want to get on the start line for the London Games. So that became my big goal. So it's probably,
that's interesting.
After rowing for sort of four years, going to a couple of world champs, I was like, oh, actually, I'd quite like to do this properly.
Yeah, it's interesting. And did your relationship with rowing change at all from when, the way you talk about your early days, it really feels like it was just full of enjoyment, kind of adventure, experiencing new things. And then all of a sudden you've now decided, right, I'm committing, and I'm going to be a serious rower. Did your relationship with rowing change a little bit from being fun and enjoyable, but you were still winning, maybe because it was fun? And did things change a little bit when all of a sudden it was all about the Olympics? That's what you set yourself to do. Did you kind of notice a difference when you even reflecting on it now? Did you think it was a different period?
No, I think I probably took a similar approach. I still tried to find enjoyment. I wouldn't say I got more serious, because that would definitely be a lie. And if you ask any of my teammates, they would probably agree with that. But I think I just had a clearer goal in my head. I think that was the clarity. That's all that changed. Is I knew where I want to go. And you talk to anyone about goal setting, that what they always say is you need to have a clear and specific goal. And I think back then I didn't really have that goal. But the only thing that changed is I had that clear and specific goal, and it meant that I could link in what I was doing to achieving that goal. Whereas before I was sort of, going through the motions, doing the training because I enjoyed it, but never really had that focus or end point. So in terms of my approach to training, probably I didn't change that much. All that changed was I had this clear goal I was aiming for, and that sort of helped direct things a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. And in terms of starting to think about careers and stuff like that, so you obviously got injured, I think in 2015, which probably kind of forced your hand a little bit. But prior to that moment, was something after rowing at all on your radar, or were you really just living the adventure, and then misfortune struck, unfortunately, and then it kind of forced you to think about it?
Yeah, I think I didn't really have a plan. I had a rough plan. My girlfriend at the time, she was a marine biologist, so she always said after the Rio Games, I've hung around in the UK for however many years. I think we should go. I've got this job lined up in Mozambique in Africa, and you should come out with me. So the plan was always after Rio was to have a year out and do some scuba diving and living on a beach. So actually, when I got injured and didn't compete in Rio, I sort of stuck with that plan because it was sort of the agreed plan we had, and I figured it would be good for me just to do something different. So that year after the Rio Games, I went out to Mozambique, where I trained to be a scuba instructor. So I worked as a scuba diver and just went surfing every day. So that was a great sort of transition, and that gave me a bit of a refresh and allowed me to think about the what next. And that led me on to my next sort of adventure. And actually, I came back from that trip with this idea that I was going to give rowing another go. So I took a coaching job, which would enable me to be able to row as well. So I did that for a number of years, trying to get back to where I was. I decided after a couple of years I wasn't going to pursue that. So, but then I stayed on coaching for a little bit, and then when coaching wasn't working out for me, I made the switch to what I do now, working in sales.
Yeah, it's interesting. You kind of talk about that period from getting injured to then Mozambique / scuba diving feel quite easy, quite natural, and it sounded like it did you tons of good. But at the time, were you quite heartbroken by it? I mean, were you still in Mozambique but thinking, I should be in a boat, I should be in Rio? Or was it really a switch where you felt like, actually, you know what, I'm really at peace with this, and actually what I'm experiencing in Mozambique and scuba diving is actually exactly what I want in my life, and rowing is good to go to bed for now?
Oh, Mark, I don't think I'll ever be over that, if I'm honest. I deleted Instagram when the Olympics were on this year because I found it tough watching people compete and get medals. I still find it tough. I still have a feeling that I didn't get to achieve what I wanted. So I think even back then I was off doing an exciting thing, but it was always in my mind. I was always had this feeling like I didn't quite achieve what I set out to achieve, and that my time was cut short. So I really struggled, and still struggle now with that whole transition out of high level sport. And I think that's probably why I'm still messing around in boats now, is because I still have that feeling that I never quite achieved what I wanted to achieve. So I'd be lying if I say it wasn't part of my I wasn't thinking about it. But one thing I would say is, when you're surfing every day and going scuba diving and open water swimming, keeping an eye out for sharks, making sure you're not going to get chowed down on at sunset, you're not really thinking about that. So it was a fantastic distraction and a fantastic way of just opening up my eyes to saying, well, actually, there's more to life than sport. You can do all these other cool things. So it served a brilliant purpose, and I think it gave me a bit of it gave me a bit of reassurance that there is more to life than sport, which I guess at that time I'd been doing it for 10 years full time. So I didn't really know or have that perspective outside of sport.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So you then come back, you feel a bit refreshed, your head's a little bit clearer, you dabble in a bit of coaching. Just one question around coaching. I mean, obviously it's a career path that I'm sure some people are probably thinking about either rowing or staying engaged on the keynote circuit, especially as an Olympian. Has that ever been attractive to you, or working for the governing bodies or Leander Club, all these sorts of things that probably are still part of the rowing world? Is that something you ever considered to try and really kind of integrate yourself into, or was it just not something for you?
Yeah. So the thing to remember with coaching, well, as an athlete, you're training 7 days a week. You're getting maybe 3 weeks off a year. What people maybe don't realize when they stop sport is that the coaches do exactly the same. So as a coach, you're coaching 7 days a week. You're not able to make it to those events you want to go to. You only get 3 weeks off a year. So for me, that was really tough. I enjoyed coaching. If coaching was a Monday to Friday 9 to 5 job, then you'd probably see me coaching still. But the reality is, it is a lifestyle, and for me, I just felt like I've spent so much of my life not having weekends, not having bank holidays, not being able to see friends and family, that I wanted a bit of a change, and that was why I shifted over into the role I'm in now, because I was like, actually, I quite fancy doing something 9 to 5. Monday to Friday. I like having my weekends. I like being able to take holiday when I want to take holiday, which is fantastic. And the other novelty was bank holidays. Like after I finished, when I was an athlete, bank holidays don't mean anything. When I was a coach, bank holidays don't mean anything. But now I'm like, wait, we get a whole day off. Coaching was very enjoyable, and I really enjoyed my time doing it. But it's tough. It's tough, man. I mean, the athlete timetable is tough, and the coaches are doing exactly the same. Maybe they're there even a bit longer because they're down there before setting things up, and they stay afterwards, wrapping things up. So yeah, it is tough for the coaches.
Yeah, interesting. So talk us through your journey to sales then. I mean, like you mentioned earlier, sales is, I think before our call, but sales is obviously quite popular with a lot of athletes for quite logical reasons. Are those logical reasons pretty much the same reason as to why you decided, okay, let's give sales a go, because it probably plays on all the strengths I have as a rower?
No, I'd be lying if I said it was. But interesting you say that. There is lots of crossover, which we can go into. But how I got this job was a guy I was at university with. He was working at this company, and I was just chatting with him when we were out on a run. And I said, I can't do another year of coaching. I just want my weekends back. I feel like this was after sort of doing 4 years of coaching, after the sort of 10 years of rowing full time. I was like, I just feel I need to do something different, like outside of the sport. And he said, oh, we've got a marketing project at our company. This was Passle, that we need help with. I'm going to introduce you to our head of marketing. So I met the head of marketing, and they said, this is the project we need. It's probably going to take you a couple of hours a week. So I was very much an intern. So I was doing this alongside my final year of coaching. I was coaching at a school, so you very much run the school year. And in about the February, after doing this role at Passle, just as a part-time intern, I was like, I'm just going to quit my job. So I let the school know that I was finishing after that school year. I didn't have anything lined up. I carried on doing this part-time stuff at Passle. And then in the summer, I was like, I should probably tell them that I've quit my other job. So I remember going to the founders of the company and saying, look, just so you know, I've left my job at the school. Is there anything coming up in the marketing team? I'd love to come and join the team. And then I'd already met some of the sales team, and my good friend from university was in the sales team. And then the founders were like, well, we don't have anything in the client success and marketing team, but we've got this spot in the sales team where we think you do really well. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm cut out for sales. I literally knew nothing about sales. And I was like quite upfront with that. And they're like, honestly, we're going to teach you what you need to know. And from what we've seen from you the last couple of months, we think you'd be a really good fit for this. So I remember starting on the job, opening up my laptop and thinking, right, sales, what should I do? But I had a really fantastic team, and many of them I still work with today, 5 years on. And I remember my colleague Will, who's also another keen athlete, in my first week, he gave me a book, The Dummy's Guide to Selling. I don't know if you've seen them. So I was like reading that, and I was meeting with him once a week and meeting with my other team members, where they were just showing me the ropes and telling me what I needed to do. And I immediately got stuck in, and sort of saw the parallels between sales and being an athlete, in that you set goals, you have targets you're aiming for. Sales is very much you get out what you put in, which is very similar to sport. That idea I was telling you about, riding the highs and lows. So there's lots of crossover, that just tenacity and hard working approach. It serves you well in sales. So I think I got on quite well. And, as I said, I'm 5 years in now, and I'm not planning on leaving this company anytime soon. I think we're doing some really exciting stuff, and the growth we've seen from when I joined to where we're at now is just been incredible. So, it's been amazing to be part of that.
Yeah, it's interesting. And with, I kind of asked a question earlier around superpowers and, what it is you took from rowing into either work. And you kind of talked about the highs and lows and kind of trying riding those out. What else are you kind of bringing out from your backpack, from your rowing days, where you're just rolling out all these skill sets, all these attributes that you can really pin back to rowing and saying, yeah, I'm good at my job today because I'm drawing on the experiences of being a rower. What does that list look like of items that you're just plugging out of your backpack on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I guess that that goal setting that we talked about. Each year we have a target that we aim for, but realistically, you have to break it down. So your year's target is your Olympics or your world champs, but you've got to have those quarterly focuses. Discipline and work ethic. I think that's something that rowing fostered. That sort of hard working ability, being able to work as a team. So in rowing, you're forced together with people you often get along with, but sometimes people you don't get along with. And it's exactly the same with what I do now. We're a sales team, but ultimately individual performance does count, and it would be the same in rowing. I raced for many years in the men's quad, but individually we still needed to perform as individuals. So I think there's lots of crossover. All the normal cliches, and then some of the other things I've discovered as well, that sort of keeping that steady, not getting too excited when things go well, not getting too down when things go badly. So there seems to be lots of crossover.
And how do you manage expectations? Because I imagine that, obviously, as someone who's rowed at a very, very high level, that you probably have extremely high expectations of yourself, but you're able to deliver on those expectations most of the time, hence why you got as good as you did. How do you kind of translate that in the workplace, where you mentioned a few seconds ago, work ethic is something that is important and comes from rowing. What happens when you don't see that in the people around you? And secondly, how do you reassess your own expectations of those people? Because holding somebody who's maybe 3 years out of uni, kind of what you said, right, is maybe looking more for balanced lifestyle, yet you've come from the extreme of sport, which probably means you're not balanced in that way, because you're able to push harder than most people can push. How do you kind of reconcile all of that with people around you? Do you kind of, how do you manage it?
I think it does take a little bit of recalibration. And this isn't in my current role, but in previous roles, one thing I noticed, coming out of sport, you operate at that high level, high intensity, is just actually appreciating that in the workplace, not everyone's there for the same reasons. Everyone has their own motivations and their own reasons for being there. So, in a previous role, I remember thinking, how can that person just be so not in not sort of all in with their job. And then I like spoke to people about it, and they're like, well, to be fair, the reason they're doing that role is, you know, they've got young kids, they want to provide for their family. They're probably just doing it because it's a good gig, and you know, it's less stress. And then it got me thinking, well, actually, people aren't always trying to be the Olympic gold medalists. Some people are content with just doing something that and they get their sort of enjoyment and fulfillment from things outside of work. So that was a realization for me. Fortunately, in the role I'm in now, I'm in the team of quite sort of high achievers. There's several former athletes, so I'm in a sort of environment that I'm sort of thriving in, because everyone's on the same page. You know, everyone has their own motivations for doing this, and it will be different things for different people. But ultimately, there's a lot of that athlete mindset going on in my team at the moment, which I enjoy, and all those benefits I talked about: resilience, teamwork, having great leaders. You get all of those benefits when you've got people that have been high performing sports people. And in my team at the moment, we've got ex rugby players, we've got football and tennis youth group, age group athletes. My colleague Will, who I'm very close with, he's probably the least sporty of us all, but he's still got 2 international caps for cricket and football for when he lived in Hong Kong when he was a kid. So, you know, he's still classed as an international athlete. There's a good bunch here, and it's been great learning, and I really enjoy it.
Just a quick question on that. I mean, culturally, is it nice or important for you to work somewhere where actually you are surrounded by ex-athletes? Does that kind of make your work more enjoyable because you have that kind of connection through international sport, or elite sport in one way or another, whether it's 2 caps or not? You're surrounded by people who obviously push themselves quite hard to achieve. Do you think that's part of your enjoyment in Passle?
I'd say it's nice, but I wouldn't say that's the reason why I enjoy it so much here. The reason why I think this is such a great place is the 2 founders that have built this company. They're 2 of the smartest people I've ever met. They're just really business savvy. They really care about the organization. They make a point on hiring the right people for the job, and it's not done on CVs. It's not who's got the most accolades on their CVs. It's like interviewing the people, thinking, are they a fit for this role? And, you know, we're still a relatively small company. I think just over 50 employees. But everyone that comes into the organization sort of signs up to what we're trying to achieve. And Adam and Tom Elgar, the guys that own the company and run the company, they've just built a fantastic culture here, and it's just a really healthy and enjoyable place to work.
Super. And 2 last questions. One is around, if you were to kind of, not to yourself actually, I think I know the answer. If you were to kind of look back to or offer advice to 18, 19, 24-year-old, and they're in the midst of their rowing career, it's kind of going well, well-conditioned, injuries don't appear to be on the radar. Is there any advice you'd give them based on your own experiences of your own rowing career?
Yeah, so don't party too hard. And on a serious note, I generally would say that because I suffered with a lot of injury, and I can't help think that maybe some of that was due to late nights, not recovering properly. But, you know, I was when I first was in the national team, I was a university student, so I was trying to balance that university lifestyle. And people often say, "Oh, you need to have a balance. You need to cut loose a little bit." And I to some point, I do agree, but I think if you've got such a short window where you can be a high performing athlete, so my advice would be like go all in. And I actually party less now. I've sort of retired from sport than I did as a professional athlete. I haven't had an alcoholic drink since New Year's Eve. So I just wish I had that sort of discipline a bit better when I was younger on. That would be my advice. don't party too hard, and make sure you get a good night's sleep.
Yeah, well, that's 100% dad vibes type of advice. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. And the other question was just around coastal rowing. So you mentioned it's going to be an Olympic discipline at Los Angeles. So what are your aspirations? I mean, you've kind of talked a bit about how much you've enjoyed it over the last couple of years. The fact it's becoming an Olympic sport probably suggests it's going to become quite popular now, with a lot of rowers who now compete for spots. So are you still thinking about it, or is it really just something you've enjoyed for the last couple of years, but realistically you don't believe this is for you?
Yeah, so how I got into coastal rowing, I was a big surfer, and where I lived in South Wales, I saw that there was the World Champs were happening for this new coastal rowing. I knew nothing about coastal rowing. I'd seen it like once or twice, visiting friends in Guernsey, and then I just reached out to British Rowing and said, "Hey, you've got this World Champs in Wales next year. Like, what happens there? Or what does it involve?" And Gwen Batten, who's a former Olympian, who's sort of been involved with coastal rowing from the world level, helping set it up as a sport. She just basically said, this is the sport, this is what's involved, this is the type of training you need to do. So I figured, it's just down the road from me. It was in Pembrokeshire, the World Champs in 2022. I'll pick up the training and I'll try and qualify and go across, see what it's all about. I really enjoyed it because I love being down on the beach, and it sort of combined my sort of love of surfing and being on the beach with doing some rowing. So I stuck with it, and then we got a silver medal that first year when I raced in Wales, and I was like, actually, this is really enjoyable. I'll see where I can take this. And the following year, there was this chatter that actually it's going to go into the Commonwealth Games. So that was an exciting thing. Before the Commonwealth Games were scrapped. So that was always on the horizon. And then last year there was talk that it was going to go into the Olympics, and then the announcement was made that it's going into the Olympics. So I had a bit of unfinished business last year where we missed out on a medal in the quad. So I wanted to try again for it this year. And unfortunately we came back and we won the World Champs. So yeah, now I'm at that point where that was sort of 3.5 weeks ago. I'm trying to decide where to go next. So I did say to the guys after we finished, I was like, that's me done. Like, I can't do this anymore. But, never say never. I'm still going to be involved in the sport. I'd really like to keep driving it on, whether that's training and helping with some of the younger athletes that are coming through, or whether it's helping from a coaching point of view. But in terms of whether I'll be trying to compete for a spot in a boat in 2028, I'd say there's a lot of training and a lot of hard work that's involved. So I think you've got to weigh up that and say, is it something you want to go all in for, or is it something you're happy to sort of just help others reach that point? And that's the decision I've got to make over the next couple of months, year.
Yeah. That's interesting. I mean, physiologically for a rower, I don't know too much from a rowing perspective, but you'll be 39, 38 by that point? Is that
yes,
right?
So I'd definitely be on the older side of things. And also the other thing to consider is for coastal rowing, I'm not the right size for it. I could do with being 20 kilos lighter and a bit shorter. So whereas in traditional rowing, I'm a very sort of good build for. I think what will happen with coastal rowing, even if I did want to compete at the higher level, I think I might get pushed out by people that are more sort of suited for that, sprint athletes, guys that sit around that sort of 70, 80 kilos mark, just because the boats handle better and everybody uses the same boats on the same setup. So it's not like in a traditional rowing boat where you set the boat up for you. You're at a disadvantage if you're a bit too tall. So it will be exciting whatever happens, but I need to figure out in the next couple of months my plan and my goals.
I think you said something between 70 and 80 kilos, and I think I land exactly in the middle of that. So maybe this is my calling for the next
Mark.
3-year cycle. Cool. Awesome. Well, Charles, thanks so much for all of that. Super insightful. And I guess there's, kind of two interesting things, how you approach your career beyond rowing, but also a fantastic plug for Passle. That seems like a great employer. and looks like a great place to work, and it seems like you're unbelievably happy. So maybe there's some people who listen to this and will reach out to you and say, hey, is there a spot on the boat? Because it sounds like it's a really awesome place to work. So really grateful for your time. Appreciate you're doing it out of the goodness of your heart. So appreciate that. And thank you very much.
Hey, no problem. And if there is anyone that has got any questions about working for tech companies in sales, transitioning out of sport, then I always say, just reach out. Always happy to help fellow athletes, point them in the right direction if I can.
Super. That's awesome. Thanks a lot, Charles.
Cheers, Mark.